Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Daniel Munich. I'm from Think Tank Idea at CERGE-EI. But my role is very small at the beginning because I'm going to give stage here to two important people who will welcome you for both organizing institutions, CERGE-EI and the Embassy of Switzerland. So I would like to ask our director, Mr. Kajak, to say his word.
Okay, let me welcome you here in this most celebrated hall of the beautiful Šebek Palace in the center of Prague, which is the home of CERGE-EI, the Center for Economic Research and Education of Charles University and the Economics Institute of the Czech Academy of Sciences. Oh, no. And I would like to welcome all of you, and especially I would like to welcome His Excellency Dominik Furgler, a new ambassador of Switzerland in the Czech Republic since September 2017. We hope His Excellency will enjoy our event today as well as any future events. Why I'm mentioning this? Our policy-oriented think tank Idea has a long-term successful cooperation with the Swiss Embassy in Prague. We organize one joint public event every year with distinguished keynote speakers from Switzerland, with the aim to present a successful practice in various areas of research and business, or in a combination of both. You may attended our past events, which were the exchange rate as a monetary policy instrument, then smart specialization RIS3, or setting up an innovation system, a Swiss model for the Czech Republic, ? Videos are available on the IDEA website. The topic for today, this is the fourth one in the event. Actually, it's not fourth one. I just learned that 16 years ago there was a first meeting, but I don't know. Maybe the secretary from the embassy was here, but nobody else, if I remember, was here. So, the topic for today is the dual vocational education and training system. This is something that is being discussed among employers and other policymakers, and it is a very hot topic for today and for our society. Today we have the opportunity to learn how it can work well in practice. Let me welcome Professor Ursula Renold of the Division of Comparative Education Systems from ETH Zurich, KOFI, Swiss Economic Institute, who is our today's distinguished speaker, keynote speaker. And after her presentation, we will have the opportunity to hear in a panel discussion about the practice in a Novartis company, presented by Sandro Krameri, as well as Czech reflection by Karel Gargulák from the Ministry of Education of the Czech Republic, and Libor Vitásek from CET Foundation, and Daniel Munich will represent the domestic idea at the Economics Institute of the Czech Academy of Sciences. So I would like to invite now Mr. Ambassador to tell us a couple of words about the introduction of this meeting.
Thank you, pane directore, Dr. Renold, distinguished panelists, ladies and gentlemen. Has anyone ever wondered how come Switzerland regularly features at the top of the world ranking in competitiveness and innovation? Or why Switzerland is synonymous with top quality, reliability, efficiency? Why the Swiss economy is going from strength to strength despite huge challenges? And how come unemployment, especially youth unemployment, is extremely low in Switzerland? Or why Swiss salaries and GDP per capita are highest among industrial nations? There are, of course, many reasons, but in my opinion, one really key pillar of our economic success is our unique Swiss professional education and training system. One I could, by the way, personally experience with my children, because they choose different paths. My two girls went straight to gymnasium and university, which is still largely a minority in Switzerland, whereas my son, who is certainly not less intelligent than the girls, chose the other way. It was more suitable for him, He first became a cartographer, a map maker, really specialized in something the Swiss are top class, very good at, like the Czech, by the way. And after working a few years, he chose really then to pursue his studies, and he's just currently finishing his master degree. Today we will hear more about our unique system and no doubt have an interesting exchange of views. And we will do so with first-class experts. And it gives me therefore great pleasure to particularly welcome Dr. Ursula Renold and our panelists who were already mentioned. Despite the title, What the Czechs, somewhere I read in the title, What the Czech Republic Can Learn. You know, this is certainly not, the idea is certainly not to lecture anybody. Educational systems are complex and based on specific local parameters and history, and they cannot simply be copied. This is clear. But I think we can really learn from each other by exchanging ideas, by comparing, by discussing critically, and that's really the aim of today's meeting. The idea of organizing such an event, at least on our side, you know, of course there were many ideas, many thoughts behind it. One is that in all modesty we think, yes, we have an excellent system, and we can see there is growing interest in it in many countries in the world. Then the topic we address is also mentioned as a priority in the coalition agreement of ANO and the Social Democrats. So we thought, well, that might be interesting for them. And another reason is that Switzerland is currently discussing in Parliament whether or when to pay the EU a second contribution, kind of cohesion money. We did so, and we had 38 projects in this country. So I hope that very soon we will have again funds to do further projects. And the Swiss government already said, in case we do this, in our second package, migration and vocational training, professional training should be a priority. So hopefully we will soon have funds. And of course, this discussion might already give us some hints, you know, where the interests lie and in which direction we could go later with concrete projects. So in this slide, I would once again like to thank all those who helped to organize the event, particularly Daniel Munich from CERGE-EI, our keynote speaker, and the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Thank you very much, Director. So, and now I will introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Ursula Renold. And
I should leave now.
I think you will better see there, but you're welcome to stay.
No, I think the panelists will probably come.
No, we will come panelists after the keynote talk, because it will be easier to watch the rich PowerPoint presentations. So, I'm going to continue introduce Professor Ursula Renold. I'm sorry, I will help myself with some notes here because her achievements are wider. So she's currently heading a research center for comparative education system at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich. And she's also a chairman of the university board of the University of Applied Sciences and Arts in northwestern Switzerland. But her past is also quite important. I think she had quite an impact on the Swiss system. I cannot, in such a short time, explain to you, but I will just mention that she was the Director General of the Federal Office for Professional Education and Technology until June 2012. In this position, she had headed Switzerland's Competence Center for Professional Education, Universities of Applied Sciences and Innovation since 2005. These are the important years. And important was also what preceded that. She was heading OPED's Vocational and Professional Education and Training Division, and she was director of the Swiss Federal Institute of Vocational Education and Training. She launched numerous initiatives which have great impact on the system. Many of them, most of them are surviving and are quite important elements of the Swiss system. We had a lunch and we discussed very detailed. So my feeling was like the Czech Republic can learn a lot about institutional arrangements which lead to quality and success. Of course, institutional systems cannot be blindly copied. One has to understand all the local conditions and specific constraints, but without learning, it's much more difficult. So, my hopes, and probably yours too, are that after the lecture and our debate, we will be a little bit smarter. What we can learn from Swiss, what to do, what not to do, it's also important. And I am giving you the floor to help us in that.
So thank you so much, dear Daniel. I prepare my update later, maybe later. I don't have time now. Okay. Yes. Your Excellency, dear Ambassador, Director of the CERGE-EI, and dear Daniel, dear panelists, distinguished guests, it's a great pleasure for me to be with you and to share my experience in how to improve and re-engineer vocational professional education and training system. And together we basically created that wonderful title on the mystery of the Swiss dual vocational education and training system. What can the Czech Republic learn and what you shouldn't do and shouldn't take from Switzerland. So my program, after all, will be I introduce you into, from a vertical point of view, what are really functions of an education system, because the driver behind all the activities in education system are these kind of basic priorities and functions. And then what is the overall purpose of vocational education training? Also compare, for example, to the traditional compulsory education or to a gymnasium. Then, because I'm very sensitive about, and I can tell it that at the beginning, we shouldn't really copy a system and just transfer it from one country to another. I can tell you this is a mission impossible. But what we can do is we can try to understand this so-called, I would say, analytical framework. What are similarities in all the countries which you have to take into consideration when you want to change a system? And here I present you the framework which we are using when we compare countries in the field of vocational education training, and I present you two benchmark instruments with results which shows you how difficult it is on the one hand to compare, but what we can do after all if we have this kind of results. And then, why is Switzerland so strong? You will see in both of these benchmark data, Switzerland is on the top. The ambassador already has mentioned. You can go wherever you want. Innovation, we are on the top 3 position, independently of the comparison. Competitiveness, also World Economic Forum, all the time Switzerland is on the top position. And the question is then, does this have any link to the education system or not? And if yes, what? And then, of course, I can address it already at the beginning. The very, very crucial point in vocational education and training is the linkage between two systems. On the one hand, it's the education system, of course, but on the other hand, it's the employment system. So a lot of countries actually are looking for the improvement of that linkage. In other words, how can we convince companies to train? That's the biggest issue in a lot of countries around the world. So I will a little bit introduce you in the question, how can we establish strong linkage between those actors from both worlds if we don't have that so far? And I finalize with my conclusion, what can you learn from us and what shouldn't you do, if I can recommend something. Now, starting with the functions of an education system, Basically, those people who are monitoring an education system, they need to know what are the principal functions, where we have to look at whether the performance is good, whether we have an efficient and effective way to solve it. First of all, and that's the dream of all educators, we should make sure, or we should analyze the system of a country to figure out what is the extent to which individual is enabled to independently shape their own future and their relation to either their environment but also to the community. So that means this wonderful dream of everybody is independent and can manage their life. We know the reality is different, but that would be one of the crucial points of an education system. We call that simply an individual control ability. Very difficult to measure. I didn't have so much result for that aspect, but I can tell you in the future, with the digital transformation, this will be one of the issues we will have. A second function is, of course, we should prepare people for the labor market, and thus securing the volume of labor quantitatively and qualitatively. The quantitative aspect is easy, because we have clear indicators for that. Qualitatively, what does this mean? I will show you what we could take as international comparable indicators and what we cannot take because it's normative, it's not rankable, you cannot bring it in an order, and therefore it's important, but for an international comparison not useful. And the last function, of course, should be social participation of all people is ensured, including the aspect of social cohesion. So the equality of opportunity question. Now, as we have to do with vocational education training, I'm basically focused now on the second function, which is the purpose of vocational education and training. And basically the main principle is we should prepare young people for a smooth entrance into the labor market with a meaningful and effective educational process. That's a simple sentence. However, behind is a lot of knowledge so that you attain that goal. But, and now this morning we had an interesting talk with the Minister of Education about how can we raise social status of vocational education training. It's not enough to have a meaningful and effective education program. You have to make sure that this program is not a dead-end education. Because young people are very clever. They see if that is a dead end for me, I don't choose it. I want to have all the options, especially nowadays in our society. We are a multi-option society, so every time we make sure that we have all the options open to move forward. So if the vocational route is a dead end, no one will choose that. Therefore, progression routes need to be developed, and that leads you quickly into a whole engineering process of the whole education system, because it's not enough just to fix the problem on the vocational level. You have to make sure that the level below the vocational education must prepare for entering people into the VET route, but also offering people progression routes into the tertiary level. Now I come to the analytical framework. How can we now compare if we know that all the VET system basically are socially constructed? Education is a very cultural biased system. Norms, values, attitudes are driver behind an education system. So there is no easy comparison because it's socially constructed. You have a history, Switzerland has a history, it's totally different. You have an economic condition, we have our economic condition. That has an impact on how you structure your education system. Therefore, we need to go beyond that and think from a theoretical point of view what matters and what are the functions which every country needs to consider if you want to at least analyze your vocational education system. At our institute, we basically carry three different traditions of theory. On the one hand, of course, we are in education, it's the curriculum theory. How to construct a curriculum that anticipates what the labor market is looking for. On the other hand, human capital theory, I just saw that Gary Becker was here. He is the inventor of that human capital theory. That's the second theory. And this helps us to understand how social system can be interlinked. It's the social system theory, it's more a sociological background theory, but it helps us to understand why some of the countries do have problems to link those two system elements. Now we have some layers which you need to understand and compare, otherwise it's very difficult to say what are we comparing. The structure of an education system and the VET system itself is an issue. It must be part of the education system with pathways and programs. I'm active in about 20 countries, and I can tell you this question is an important question. In the US, for example, they have a lot of apprenticeships, registered apprenticeship, and they call that a system, apprenticeship system. But it has nothing to do with their education system. It's basically labor market integration programs for adults. So this is not what we mean here. We mean really a program that is part of the education system. Then the governance. How can you organize an effective and efficient system that works for all? We need to understand your type and mode of governance. We need to understand your social institutional setting, who is involved in governing that system, and then the linkage between partners. A third level is VET approach. In the theory, you can solve the problem of meaningful educational process very differently. There are basically three ideal types. We call that market-driven approach, where especially the companies has a say. Again, it's UK, it's US, it's sometimes the Asian country who are doing that. Or you have the state control approach, which I think is here applied in the Czech Republic. The education ministry has the say basically, and it's mainly driven by the state control. Or you have an occupation-driven approach, where you make a kind of reversed engineering of the curriculum. You first ask what is the profession of an IT supporter, of a mechatronic, of a hairdresser, of a banking clerk, what is exactly the role, the occupation, what do they need to know? So you are coming from the labor market, and then you make a reversed engineering with regard to the curriculum that produces a totally different curriculum at the end. This is what the Germans, the Austrians, Switzerland, Denmark have as an approach. And last but not least, we have to distinguish between a VET program and a VET system. So a program basically is a kind of value chain from curriculum design to application, measuring outcome, and feedback process. But if you want to talk about the system, it's the whole ecosystem behind that has an impact on that curriculum value chain. And here we deal with policy, with strategies, with regulation, with selection, with infrastructure. Basically what my colleague actually tried to revise the strategy for a better and more efficient system. And after all, of course, we from research need data. We need to monitor the whole process and the system and figure out what kind of indicators we need to follow up and to check whether the quality is here or not. So this is the analytical framework. And now you see the complexity is huge. So if you work in research, you know exactly, we can maybe work on that topic and try to evaluate something. We can work on that corner to figure out what works, but it's very complex to compare whole systems. Therefore, I just show you two instruments we were introducing to compare country. On the one hand, we start here at the end, where we want to be and what are the differences with regard to countries. We created a so-called COF, this is the abbreviation for our Swiss Economic Institute, a COF YLMI tool. It stands for Youth Labor Market Index Tool. Here you can go on that URL and you can make your own comparison among countries. It's a web tool where you can basically figure out what is your country compared to 3 others. I picked up here the spider graph. So basically, we have 12 indicators. I don't go into the details of all the 12 indicators, but I can tell you these indicators, the data are from ILO, OECD, or Eurostat. So these are already comparable data where we put in a frame so that we can compare them and create an index. It's a similar index as the innovation scoreboard or the WEF competitiveness report. We basically use 3 indicators that describes the activity state of the young generation in the age of 15 to 24. This is this youth cohort age range. Unemployment rate of youngsters, relaxed unemployment rate, and the need rate means not in employment and education and training, not doing basically nothing. These are activity states, and then we have 5 indicators describing the quality of work. For example, do they work under a temporary contract below 18 months? Or do they work involuntary part-time? They have the potential to work more, but there is no more work available, or atypical working hours, or in work at risk of poverty, or in a vulnerable employment relation. Those 5 indicators basically describes a little bit the situation how is the quality of the jobs. And because the youngster in the age of 15 to 24 years hopefully are still in education, we basically add 2 indicators that describe the education system. The one is formal education and training rate, and the other is skills mismatch. Skills mismatch here is a very simple indicator. It's the best you can have in an international comparison, but it's a weak indicator, I have to say. You basically compare the 3 levels, primary, secondary, and tertiary education, and you see how much people are working on their trained level and what is the rate of unemployment. And then the 2 others are the transition smoothness, how fast are young people entering the labor market compared to adults, for example, or the time they need in order to get to an unlimited contract. Now, the higher the score here is, the better. So sometimes it's not the absolute value you see, it's the score. And what you can see here, the blue line here is basically Switzerland, the dark blue line, the light blue line is Finland, red is France, and yellow is Italy. So, you know, the situation of Italy, it's a little bit a disaster for young people in Italy. They have a huge unemployment rate, and it's not only that means they have here a lower score, but they're working, those who are working in bad conditions. So that the tool here basically helps you describe what is the overall situation of the young generation. Now, the same thing you can do over time. So we have data from 1990 up to now. We just published the last year, 2 weeks ago. You see here Switzerland is quite stable over time. Then also France and Finland, they are below Switzerland with regard to the overall index. And Italy, after the financial crisis of 2007, they basically break down. The same picture you can see if you have a look at Spain, Portugal, Greece, all of those countries, they basically were affected by the financial crisis. Now, we were interested in the question, what is the education system of those countries? And what are some interesting differences? The OECD, basically, they decide about what is a VET program, what are the criteria in order that you are considered as a full-time VET program or a dual VET program. And we make simple correlations here on this y-axis. You have the confused labor market index value, and here you have the percentage of school-based VET, the same approach as you have here in the Czech Republic. And you see it's a negative correlation. So the higher the percentage of full school-based VET, the lower, here in Italy, the index value of the youth labor market index is. And Switzerland is on the top, and Finland and France is a little bit in the middle. I choose Finland because Finland, the prediction could be they are so good at PISA, and a lot of countries were going to Finland to learn what are they doing. But if you now have a look at their labor market data, you see, oh, they are not as good as they are in PISA. The other correlation is the percentage of combined school workplace VET with the youth labour market index, and this is the opposite correlation. Switzerland, Denmark, Germany, Austria, all those who have this dual kind of vocational approach are on top. Here you are with regard to that. I mean, you have here, according to the OECD standard, you have some dual combined school workplace approaches, but your youth labour market index is not as high as the other countries. We have the data from the Czech Republic, and I have to say, here Switzerland is dark blue, you are light blue. You are not bad. I mean, you are almost Switzerland. So therefore we have to, it's a good message. We have to think critically if that is true and to what extent is that true, and he already says that's not true. Okay, we will have a look at that. I mean, there are of course some indicators where you are not as good as Switzerland, especially in the working condition. The skills mismatch, you are on the opposite of us, so you have a problem there, but we need now further research to figure out where exactly is the problem in your country. Anyway, see here, at least compared to, I choose the Czech Republic, Poland, and the EU 2028, so yellow is the EU 28, you are at least above EU 28, which is a good message. However, the development is not so stable, so the question is if that goes down in the future or if you turn towards Switzerland. Good. Second, so we know now Czech Republic is not bad, but some room for improvement is visible. The next instrument, unfortunately I have no data for the Czech Republic, but I can tell you what is our reflection. I just show you that correlation is not causality, so it gives us a hint, maybe there is a recipe behind, but we need more research. Our hypothesis is, and the research we are doing is basically driven by the hypothesis that if actors from the two systems are working together closely, that will have an impact on the labour market data. I have not the time to show you all the results, but we have actually, with OECD data, the proof that this dual education is much better with regard to outcomes. But how can we develop a country towards that approach is then a tricky thing, and we need more information and understanding what you could improve. So the system theory basically is saying you have a program, that's the curriculum, and that should lead to education, and the selection, the code is passing or failing. Education is all about selection. The employment system, the program is the labor market with demand and supply of labor, and the code is payment or non-payment of a wage. The more you are skilled, the higher is your wage. So our hypothesis, if the interaction is closer between two parts, you will have a better outcome. Now the question is, what counts? Here is the theory, and the linkage between, the power linkage between the education system and the employment system. We have to figure out where you are with regard to your program. And again, we were thinking that the intensity of linkage, there is somewhere an optimal linkage. We don't know where that linkage is exactly, but it's not either on the education side. If the education side has all power, the industry will complain about the skills which are not the one they are looking for. And on the other hand, if the employment is defining everything, that's not either good for young people because they will not be recognized with their skill set in the education system. So therefore, we want to know what goes into that power. Very simple graphic. We have a value chain from the curriculum design to the application to the feedback. These are all observable points where we can observe the interaction between partners. For example, who defines the qualification standard in your country? In our country, decision competence is on the industry side. In your country, as I understand, it's the Ministry of Education. More or less inclusion of the involvement quality of companies is here, but not to the same extent as we have that in Switzerland. Then learning place. Do you share learning place. How much time spend students in the workplace environment? In Switzerland, it's about 75%. You learn and work in a company, and 25 to 30% is the school part. Most of the country do have the opposite. Workplace regulation or cost sharing. Who is paying for the infrastructure? Teacher, equipment. Are the teachers coming from the industry or only typical school teachers? And so on. Examination. Do the examination happen in the workplace environment or only at school? A very important point. And then information gathering for updating. Who is doing that? Who is involved in that moment where we decide we need to update the curriculum? Nowadays, with the digital transformation, I can tell you, it's a huge pace of change. Otherwise, you are outdated. So we did a survey in 20 countries where we asked experts, a structured survey, online survey. Some of them are, in some countries, in the dark blue countries, we involved about 50 experts. In the other one, only 2 or 3. Secondary country, and here you have the average. Basically, you see Austria, Switzerland, Denmark, Germany, Poland, Iceland are on the top, and at the bottom are the Asian countries, because they are not used to include the industry people in vocational programs in an intensive way. They do it, but to some extent only. What you now can see is, same picture, we have again a spider web, where we see the average here is the purple line, the dark one here for Singapore is then the score for the country we have in the center, and the white line is the top score you can attain. What you see is Singapore is not even in all the points above the average, so it's below the average. And that has to do because Singapore is basically a country where they have the state control approach, where the companies are paying the infrastructure, new equipment, but that's all, not really a lot of linkage. We then did the correlation between the Youth Labour Market Index and the COF, our COF Education Employment Linkage Index. And for European country, we have the correlation. There must be a correlation between the two indices, but it's only a correlation, and we need more research to make causal studies. When we go a little bit deeper, because now it's the question, how can we help other countries to see what they could do? I show you here another graph. Here you have the questions we asked those experts. And in that slice you see this is the maximum score you can attain, and the colored full surface is the score of the country in the center. And the broader the slice is, the more important is that topic. It's an empirical driven weighting scheme out of all the experts involved. So this is the chart for Switzerland. We have a very colorful spider web, so we are here not very good at. Do companies help pay for off-site VET education? No, we don't pay because the confederation basically is paying, or the cantons. But that is in other countries is a difference. But I have to say it's not really important. It's not the way we should improve something. Important are really, do companies help decide when an update needs to take place? Here you see we have still something to do. We are not the best with regards to that question. However, here is company role in VET curriculum design legally defined. Yes, it is defined in a law. If we see now the chart for Slovenia, which is sometimes the country you would like to compare, you see they have here, are companies involved in VET both individually and through association, 100%. Well, I have to say this is not a focus country, so the two experts are behind that. It's not that valid, but anyway, they claim we have an involvement. The same is companies' role in VET curriculum designed legally. Yes, they may have a law and it's written down. However, on the other side, you see here, for example, how much learning takes place in the workplace. Not that much, so they will have a challenge with regard to that. Colorado in the US. even worse. So they are at the very beginning to start to work together. They have almost nothing with regard to here to that two students have contracts when they work. Yes, they do. But the rest is really underdeveloped. So what you can do if we have an instrument like that, we can help the country to tailor-make what are the most important actions you now should initiate in order to improve your linkage in due time. I come to Switzerland. Switzerland, as you have heard from the ambassador and from other colleagues, is in the center when it comes to vocational education training, because here, this is what we call vocational education training. After the compulsory school, 70% of students enroll in vocational education training. 7-0. This is world leader. We have two options. The 2-year program for, I would say, practically gifted people, not high intellectual capacity. They can do more routine work. We have 40 curricula. The majority are doing VET, federal VET diploma, 3 or 4 years. And we have 230 options for that. I myself started my career with an apprenticeship in a bank. And it's obvious in Switzerland, CERGE-EI, the highest Swiss bankers, did start like that. And I just heard that Mr. Ott from the Swiss embassy had the same career. So in Switzerland, it's basically common that at that age you may start with this education. But why is it an attractive system for Swiss youngsters? Because you see, it's very complex. We have all options to progress to a next level, independently what we have done in the first choice on upper secondary 2 level. So the arrows here, green or red, are showing how you can climb up your ladder within the education system. University of Applied Science, traditional university, bachelor, master, doctorate, or, and this is not so known, we have also a non-university tertiary education level, which we call professional education and training. They don't deliver a bachelor program, but it's for those people in the labor market who want to do a second formal education. It's basically, I would say, we call that federal PET diploma or advanced federal PET diploma. It's the highest standard you can reach in a certain industry sector. Accountancy, for example, all those who are working in KPMG or PwC, they are doing this kind of advanced examination. It's functionally something different. It's not lower or higher in the hierarchy of education. It's equal but different. Here again, the pathways in PET are again 3 pathways, 450 curricula in the PET colleges, 240 program in federal PET diploma, and 170 in advanced federal PET diploma. For the Swiss small and medium enterprise industry, this is the backbone. We have, of course, academics, but you will see more of them, more people are doing this kind of formal education. So the governance and the impact, now the question is, why are we so strong with regard to that linkage? We have a well-aligned governance. So basically the professional organization, sometimes together with the trade unions, but we have not so strong trade unions, they are the main counterpart together with the government, central government, and with the 26 cantons. This is our tripartite regime or partnership, which makes sure that the curriculum value chain is efficient. And you see here the results in the LD for Switzerland. Again, here this is the average. Switzerland is the blue line, and the top score is the white one. So you see Switzerland is good, but we have also room of improvement, and that education employment linkage helps us to see where we need to discuss. For example, I'm in touch with our federal administration to see, hey, who is involved in our curriculum revision? Are those innovative companies who are at the forefront of research really involved or not? If they are not involved, we are not sure if they really did make the right decision towards the new curriculum. Professional association makes a big difference to other countries. So we are an organized market economy because we have a strong social partnership, and those associations have different levels. We have National Umbrella Association, the Confederation of Swiss Employer Association, or the Swiss Trade Association for small and medium companies. Today in the lunch I learned that you have that too. Mr. Havlicek is one of the representatives from your trade association, which is a good message. We have two strong umbrella unions, but their role is more influencing the politicians, and they sit in a commission, expert groups, but are not involved in curriculum development. The body who is involved in curriculum development are the around 450 professional association. We have for almost all occupation an association. The Swiss Banking Association, the Swiss Insurance Association, the Swiss Carpenter Association, the Swiss MEM, Swiss Manufacturing Association, you name it. For all the occupation we have here a responsible body, and if they have a general collective labor agreement, then the unions are involved too, but that is only for 40 cases the situation. They define the occupation, they basically develop the framework curriculum, and they produce the training material for the company. So everything is done in the private economy. Has nothing to do with the Ministry of Education. And on a regional level, we have regional chamber of commerces. They make promotion for apprenticeship and are involved in examination. Now, the biggest advantage in my view is out of that public-private partnership, we have benefits basically for everyone. You see here, due to the fact that we have a huge engagement of companies, the companies, they invest 60% of the cost of the vocational education training system is basically taken by companies. So the confederation, the public expenditure is only about 40%, 2.4 billion Swiss francs. The costs are 4.8 billion Swiss francs for companies. Why are those companies investing such an amount of money? Because you have a flip side. The benefit, the calculation of the benefit means the benefit in the average is higher than the cost. So they have 5.2 billion return out of that training approach. So therefore we can say Switzerland has a business approach with regard to training. And you can imagine now, if we are here at the university, if the government need to spend only 40% for vocational education training and 70% of youngsters are doing that, we have much more money to spend for innovation, for research, for good universities. So this is the win-win situation for all partners in Switzerland. Now, how does this work with regard to cost benefit? It's very simple calculation. So, but I want to explain you the variables behind that matter so that you get to that net benefit. Basically, you have a program duration. 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, that's very important in Switzerland. And you have here the productive value or the training cost. At the beginning, you have higher costs. Let's assume that it's a linear training cost curve, and it's basically raising over time because the salary raises every year for the apprenticeship, for the apprentice. The productive curve, the productive contribution of the apprentice, however, at the beginning is of course not very high because they need to be trained. But if you have a very good syllabus in the company, that matters a lot, the productivity will raise over time. And what we can calculate is the break even. When does this productive curve turns into the benefit, into the return per period? So I cannot go more into the detail of that theory. You can read some of the papers if you are interested in that. But here I just listed the factor, the calculation which is behind that cost-benefit model. Cost is simple: apprenticeship salary, trainer salary, machine tools and material. That's the cost side. But on the benefit side, we make a distinction between the hours an apprentice is unskilled occupied in a company, and the skilled work, which is then multiplied with the salary of a skilled person. You can have reduced hiring costs if you retain the student or the apprentice after graduation. Then you can even get to a higher benefit if you save some hiring costs. The overall average for Switzerland here, 3-year program in euro, gross cost for 1 year is 72,000 euro for one student 1 year. But the productive contribution is 79,000. So they come to a return on investment 10% in the average. And in the 4-year program it's a little bit less because it's more expensive to train people in the 4-year program. That's why they have a 4-year program. So that's the business approach in Switzerland. And since we do this study since 2003, companies start to realize, aha, okay, I understand now if I follow that syllabus, I may have the chance to get to that productivity. Now, the last reason why I think we are good at preparing people for our workforce is also driven by the fact that we expose people 70% to the workplace learning. And what we know here from our job market monitor, we have data from 1950 up to now, long-term trends, what happens on the labor market. And what you see here is, of course, as in your country, more people in the future need higher education, but not necessarily academic education. VET diploma, that means this apprenticeship type of diploma, 50% of all job offers still are looking for this kind of person. So it's an asset. What we also see is people having not more than compulsory school are not anymore on demand. You need to at least have an upper secondary education. But what is really striking, and that makes me a little bit nervous, especially for those who have a school setting, the labor market is looking for more soft skills and more experience. So if you make an interpretation of that trend, that basically means people are not prepared on that. If the demand is huge, the supply is not here on that skills. And then you can question yourself, why is that the case? Of course, it is the whole labor force. The reason can be in the digital transformation. A lot of people need to change now. The change is fast. Maybe they have not the experience they had in the past. And the soft skills are basically the skills where they can show when they move from one job to the other. What we know from research is definitely not the topic for schools. It's very difficult to train people on soft skills. So now, as we understand that the workplace will be in the future the central place to expose people to, because workplace learning is the best place to learn soft skills. Schools can never cope with the fast change in technology. If you are learning in the company, you are exposed to the best available technology. So we have to think about how can we now establish this linkage. What we know from our survey is you have to make sure that employers are setting the qualification standard. They know what is needed in the labor market, so they have to have a say. Independently, I have to say it's very hard, independently if people at school think they cannot. They have a different rationality, a different language, but that's why you need to have a group of people who are discussing with each other. Deciding when an update needs to happen, it's only the companies, they're at the forefront of the new innovation, of the constant change. They know when something needs to change. And they should be involved in the examination forms. That means some exams should happen in the workplace. And last but not least, students spend most of their time in the workplace instead of school. This is, by the way, also a finding OECD recently presented. Workplace exposure is the mantra for having a better outcome effect in the future. Now, what can you do? First of all, you need to make sure if the data you have for your countries are trustworthy data, or if you need more data to get in deeper into the truth of what is the situation in your country. We could do a measurement for an education employment linkage, for example, together with you, to figure out how is your spider web looking like. Is it like Colorado? Is it like Switzerland? And then you see where you have your issues. First of all is then the question, do we agree with the finding? If not, why? And because the why question is always very important, those who can explain why this is wrong, they have some indicators or some data to show why it's different. Are there any results we find surprising? This is very important to see what I've learned now. Are there any bad results that we already knew about? That means, in the US, I make a joke, but in the US, I attend over years the same panel discussion, and they make no step forward, even though they know their indicators. The data are becoming worse and worse over time, but there is no action towards reform that really matters. So that is, when you know that before, then you should ask why we don't change. What is needed in order to take actions to make a step forward. But I learned Mr. Havlicek is kind of enthusiastic, strong man who is willing to change together with your Prime Minister. So you have at the moment, I would say, a lot of energy. Do we have all the information we need to start a reform process? And do we have enough resources and expertise to start the reform process? That's sometimes underestimated. I went through more than 300 reforms, and I can tell you, if you don't have good leadership, it won't work. The leader type of person is a very important one, so that you can survive, because education reforms take 10 to 20 years. And nowadays, with that short-term thinking, it's very difficult that you keep a team together over 10 years. But this is a must. And then, do we have a strategy how to organize a buy-in from companies? So have you cost-benefit studies, something like that, where you can show companies, listen, it's feasible to make a business case in the Czech Republic too. However, at the beginning, the cost factor is a little bit higher than the productivity. Now I conclude what is now the lessons learned for your country and what not. First of all, don't copy Switzerland. I just start with that. We have a good result, but you cannot copy. Our ecosystem history is totally different to yours. The political system, the legal framework is different. So systems are socially constructed, and that is why it's important that you get your socially constructed world first analyzed. Generate evidence regarding your youth labor market. Where is really the problem? I heard that the companies are not satisfied with the skills they get. So, but you have not bad indicator data in the youth labor market. We need to figure out where is really the problem. Make a SWOT analysis of the VET sector. What is the VET sector in the Czech Republic, and how is that linked to other education levels? Then develop a policy, VET policy strategy or a VET act to regulate the institutional requirements. I mean, I've heard that you are on the way to revise the strategy, which is a good way forward. Convince industry association and firms to train. That's the most important point, and without that you won't change it so much, I can tell you. So if I work with countries, I say only if the industry partner is committed I will start with you, because without that, forget it. It's in the future even more important. Make cost-benefit simulation to identify the variables of a program in your context, or initiate pilot project parallel to the strategy to figure out what works and what doesn't work in your context for small companies and for big companies. And then pilot project, evaluate, improve then before upscaling in the whole country. So this is another way how you could improve the already initiated activities. The only thing I really recommend, we are open to help you, but not from the point of view that we want to sell the Swiss system. We are open to help you to identify your own socioeconomic and sociocultural aspects so that you can create your own system. This is the most important aspect. That said, thank you very much. If that was too much, we offer a so-called reform lab at the ETH in Zurich, where we invite country to present reform case. 10 lectures, 90 minutes, so then you know everything what we know from theory. And it's really a good thing, I would say. We have 35 countries who already went through that, and with some of them we are now in a deeper process to improve the system. So you are invited to join that reform lab if you need more information. Thank you very much for listening. I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Thank you very much for very inspiring presentation. And the program which will follow is following. I will invite panelists step by step to present their reflection on the presentation and on the questions you find in the poster distributed before. And I will start inviting Sandro Cameri, who is head of Human Resource University Relations and Apprenticeship at Novartis Business Service Unit, who will have shorter top-up presentation from the side of course, Novartis is an important employer, practitioner of all this. So he will share with us his experience, and follow will Czech members of the panel. So, please.
Thank you very much, and welcome also from my side, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to present our case here at this panel. Novartis Pharma AG, Novartis is a global healthcare pharmaceutical company, one of the biggest, with headquartered in Basel. In my role, I'm responsible also for vocational education and the implementation in this framework in Basel. I would like to show you a bit why we do vocational education, how we do it, and then also give an insight what the benefits from our point of view are. The main pillars of our strategy are that we want to develop future talents in professions which are relevant for our industries. And we do that beyond our own needs, because we want to contribute to the whole system, and also be able to recruit graduates later on in time, even if they don't join our company straight away, but maybe at a later point in time. We have set clear standards to ensure high quality, beginning from already in the selection process of the candidates, where we go through theoretical, practical trainings to look whether they are really suitable for the professions, and to ensure that they remain in the system, remain in the vocational training during these 2, 3 or 4 years training period that were mentioned. We want also to promote our image as attractive employer and responsible employer, to take part in the system, and then of course be respected for our commitment to do that as well, to promote young people. What you see here is an overview of the professions we currently train, and we have about 290 vocational trainees currently at Novartis in Switzerland in 11 professions, and as a special add-on we offer also a 1-year assignment in the US to 4 graduates after their final exams, which help them to get an insight into a different culture, and they bring to us valuable feedback which we can use in our headquarters to give argumentative basis for the whole system. We have 3 strategic professions. These are namely professions which nobody else probably would train but our industry. So we are quite keen on having these professions in our portfolio to have the future talent pool. These are lab technicians in chemistry and biology, and those work more in the research and development area of our business, and then chemical and pharma process technicians, which work more in the production area. Some of these we send, some of the lab technicians we send to the US for a 1-year assignment after the exams, as I mentioned before. And then on the lower side of the page you see other professions we train as well. We do not have as much trainees in these professions as in the strategic key professions, but these are also professions which are important for our business. So on one hand side we have a need there as well, and we also would like to support the system. Our role in the vocational education training network, you have seen probably the right hand side here, the threefold system with the Confederation, the cantons and the professional organizations. We are the professional organization in this system, and primarily we employ and take care of the vocational trainees or apprentices, as we also call them. We also select internally amongst our associates the professional trainers, get them special training in order that they are prepared to train these young apprentices in the professions. And with this we ensure the practical on-the-job training during their training cycle. As said before, we define the internal quality standards, we develop the internal strategy, how we want to approach it, and we coordinate the network from our side, and also, and I think that was also an important part mentioned before, we influence the training content, the curriculums. If we see changes coming up, then we try to influence the curricula in order that these vocational trainees are trained in the way we would like to have them in future. How do we organize the training? Normally it's a dual system which is in place. We have a threefold system. In essence, it's theoretical and practical training which is ideally combined in the training. You see on the first pillar there is vocational schooling. We have vocational training and practical training. The dual system mainly says there should be vocational schooling and practical training in the companies. We added the vocational training here to offer people a basic practical training, which is quite important for us. The first pillar is the mandate of the cantons, so they offer the general education, and this is done by Apprentice, an external organization. I will show on the next slide what exactly Apprentice is, but they have the mandate from the canton to offer that. Apprentice for us also does branch courses, so industry standard courses, and they offer this basic practical training. And this is key for us because in chemistry, biology, these young people have to learn the essential techniques, methods before they are entering the on-the-job training, so the productive field. After this training, they are well prepared to enter our offices, our labs, and then they are supported by supervisors, mentored by supervisors. They are integrated into our culture, they learn about our value system, and of course provide productive work. This piece here is the mandate of the professional organization, and we have here this somehow a bit externalized and take a strong share and influence in this. This is the apprentice training. Okay. Siri wanted to help, and I tried on my own anyway. What is Apprentice Training Corporation? This is a combination of a company which offers about 70 membership firms vocational education, especially this basic training I mentioned before. This allows not only big companies as Novartis, but also small and mid-sized companies to take share in this education model. Training people in chemistry, biology and topics is quite expensive. It needs a lot of infrastructure. With this model, we are convinced that also smaller companies can afford to train people in these professions and add to the system. Apprentice covers the field of natural scientific professions, of technical and of commercial professions. I mentioned before of the general education, the branch course and the practical basic training, which is set as a mandate. And they also, in addition, offer the professional education piece, so the more on the tertiary level that you've seen before. They offer additional training courses there to also experienced associates. And they are following a certified quality management system, which ensures quality throughout the whole system. So these are the benefits from our side. We believe and we are an attractive employer and respect for our commitment, and we attract lots of applicants for our training positions, for our vocational education positions every year. We hire about 90 new trainees every year into these different professions I showed before, and we also see that we have it has a positive reputational impact. But it's also a good talent pool for us. We have highly qualified and committed people coming out of the system, and they are also loyal to us. Not only now, but also in future. 95% of our apprentices graduate, so we have a very, very low dropout quota, which is far above benchmark, I would say. We have about 30% which finalize their exams with excellent results. They bring productive contributions already during their vocational training. Between 40 and 60% of the graduates are hired after graduation. The difference is manifold. Some of them enter into mandatory military service, some of them go traveling and take time out, some of them don't want to continue in this profession. And what is important for us as well, and what we foster as well, is that around 20% continue with further studies in other schools, also at universities, in sometimes mostly in universities of applied sciences. Whether they are entering the company straight after our vocational training or also later in time, we experience that we have a fast onboarding. They know the company, they know our tools, they know the processes, and they know that they fit into the culture. And we know this as well when they join us. And also those who go onto the job market and don't want to come back to us still have a sustained employability and find other jobs at other companies who offer who are working in the same area fields as we are. We also have benefits on our side for the professional trainees. We have a knowledge transfer and can develop our internal supervisors. As theory and practice ideally complementary each other, there is a constant exchange between the professional trainers and the apprentices. They learn from experienced people how they do things. They are somehow taught practically what they have to do, how they have to approach certain processes. And on the other hand side, trainers gain as well leadership experience and job enrichment. And then we have some hypothetical benefits. Hypothetical because we didn't measure it so far in more detail, but I'm convinced that we avoid a lot of later training costs. If these people would not be available on the market, we would have to invest anyway into the system, into the training, and it's highly infrastructure based, it's expensive infrastructure, so we for sure can avoid these opportunity costs with this as well. We also realized that it's easier to upskill or reskill people. For example, following a technological innovation, and we currently experience that in the field of biotechnology. Our industry is going through some changes, and we are currently retraining people into the field of biotechnology, where we build on the professions we have already trained so far, and add some additional training to bring them on the right track for our new fields that we enter in. And to close my short presentation, I would like to share this feedback on US assignment. We sent them to the US, I mentioned before, and we also asked the supervisors to give us feedback to show what the competencies, what the skills are that these apprentices have, these vocational trainees have, as I like to call them. And I leave it up to you to read it shortly, but you see that they really bring a lot of experience, a lot of value to the company. So with this, I like to thank you and pass on to the next.